Right, friends, so this week's Parsha is the culmination of the Exodus, the crossing of the Red Sea. Yesterday in Shul, we began our discussion about the song that the Jewish people sang when they crossed the Red Sea, and we said that every day in our morning prayers, and we spoke about the significance of a song altogether, which God willing will continue in the coming weeks, Shabbat morning. So the end of the Shira reads like this. So they're praising God, for the Exodus and the fact that the Egyptians that pursued them now, they're free of them, rid of them. Their former tormentors, taskmasters, have met their just reward in water, because, right, that was the first decree leveled against the Jewish people, to drown the Jewish boys in water, and God punishes and rewards for that matter, measure for measure. So at the end, it reads, "You shall bring them and plant them on the mount of your heritage." Without explaining all the details here, this is a poem and a song, a reference in general to the land of Israel, Mount Moriah, where the temple is built, and then goes on to say, "A foundation for your dwelling place that you made, O God, the sanctuary, the dwelling place, O God, which your hands founded or established." And then it concludes with, "God will reign to all eternity." All right, so it's a reference to the temple, and for that matter, the future temple, when God will reign to all eternity, his heaven, his kingdom established on earth. So let's have a look now at the commentary. So the verse reads, you got it there in front of you, the small page first. Mikdash Adonai koinenu yodecha. The sanctuary, or O God, that your hands established. Now, what you're reading now there is there's two, and it's a small page you want now. A commentary from Rashi on the Talmud, which discusses this verse. So Rashi explains in his commentary there on the Talmud, Mikdash ha'osid she'anu mitzapin, the future temple this verse is talking about, for which we mitzapin means which we anxiously await, we hope for. Bonoi is built, u'meshuchlal, and complete, who it is. It's done, it's made. Yigale v'yovei mishamayim, will be revealed and come from heaven. Shenamar, as our verse just stated, Mikdash Adonai, the house of God, or your house, O God, koinenu yodecha, your hands established it. Conclusion, who will build the third temple? I just read it. God, right? Black and white, doesn't get clearer than that. You establish it, and Rashi spelled it out. Should I say it again? Rashi's commentary in explaining this verse. It's built and complete, and will be revealed and descend or come from heaven, as the verse says, the sanctuary, O God, your hands have established. Clear? Okay, commentary. But Divrei Chazal, in the words of our sages, however, Matzino, we find Deot Shonot Benoseze, different opinions in this subject, namely, who builds it. Yesh no mekomot, there are places shebehem ne'amar kedivrei Rashi. There are sources that state, as we just quoted from Rashi, Beit HaMikdash hashlishi yavo min hashamayim, that the third temple comes from heaven. V'ilu bimkomot achedim, but in other places, Matzina, we find, Shehu yibaneh b'dei Adam, it'll be built by the hands of man, Al Yidei HaMelech HaMashiach, through the King Mashiach. So listen, for example, I'll translate directly from the great Maimonides, the great Rambam, who wrote a book of Halacha, and fascinatingly, whenever his colleagues disagree, they make no secret of it. But when he describes the building of the third temple, as a ruling in halacha, there is no disagreement. It means that there's a kind of a consensus. The way Maimonides describes matters, and it's not like we just read here. This is what it says. He describes here Mashiach's coming. And he describes Mashiach's coming in two stages. It's a famous halacha. It's halacha number 4 of chapter 11. Second last chapter of his magnum opus, the Mishnah Torah, the great code of Jewish law, upon which all subsequent codes are based. And if a king will arise from the house of David, it means he is a descendant of King David, steeped in Torah, and pursues, involved in the observance of the commandments like David, his ancestor, according to the written law and the oral law. Right, that's the first description. So he's a descendant of King David, and he's a great scholar. And he's a scholar of every area of Torah, written law and oral law. Moreover, he will compel all Jews to go in its path, in the path of Torah. Moreover, he will strengthen its breaches, which means areas where Jews are faltering in observance. He will strengthen that, like a breach in a wall. Moreover, he will fight God's wars. So if someone is doing the above, fits that criteria, so the law is Hareze becheskas shehu Mashiach. We can assume that he is Mashiach, but it's an assumption, because yet there's yet a second stage, which would establish his identity for certain. If he did the aforementioned and was successful, and built the temple in its place, and gathered the dispersed of Israel back to Israel, then he is certainly the Mashiach. Incidentally, this is a very critical statement. Again, there's no legal authority that disputes this. Namely, that the ingathering of the exiles happens after the building of the temple. So there were those scholars, great scholars and well-meaning people, who argued that the establishment of the state of Israel was the messianic fulfillment of the ingathering of the exiles. But it's clearly not, because that happens after the building of the temple. Not to say that it's not a precursor, it's a great and wonderful thing, but to call it redemption or the beginning of redemption is a deep error, because although well intended, when you call this redemption, then heaven says, well, okay, that's your redemption. It's not. Without going into further detail, it didn't bring, for those who came back, a greater observance either. On the contrary, for the vast majority coming back to Israel, that's it. We're Jewish enough. There's no need for observance, and just divide the jury. So, a lot of work to be done there. But I think most people agree now, even for those that held that it was the beginning of redemption, it's not. Especially when our own government surrenders Israel. This is not quite redemption. At any rate, just back to the point at hand. We'll continue the halacha. So if he does all the aforementioned, he builds the temple in its place, he gathers the dispersed. I just want to conclude my point by saying, the Rebbe said that the establishment of Israel is a precursor. Jews coming back it's preparing the road, the ground for that, but it's not redemption. It's not part of the redemptive process. It's all preparation for it. So if he does all of the above, he's certainly the Mashiach, and then he concludes by describing his final achievement, and that is he will literally fix Tikkun Olam. That's where they get, the federations, thank God, picked up this expression. Tikkun Olam, it's right out of the Rambam. He will fix the world, all of it, to serve God with one in unity. This is the non-Jewish world. Light unto the nations, that's the whole point. And he quotes a verse, for then the prophet speaks in God's name, I will transform or bring about the nations of the world a clear tongue, that they all call upon the name of God and serve him with one shoulder, which means shoulder to shoulder, one consent in unity. At any rate, what do we see from here? That who builds the Beit HaMikdash? In black and white. Man, Mashiach does. It doesn't mean he does it alone. He builds it. Man does it. And note, there's no miracles described here. There's no miracles. Great leader He was a descendant of the royal house of David, is a great scholar. He inspires Jews to come back to Judaism. He strengthens breaches. He fights God's wars. These are open for physical or spiritual, maybe both. If he's successful, builds a temple, all the Jews come back, and then motivates the whole world to serve God with one consent. There's no description of anything miraculous here. Now that's also very significant, and but we'll leave that detail. Right now we're focusing on the critical question: who builds the third temple? So we've concluded there are two opinions. We have Rashi and others quoting the verse in this week's Parsha that says what? God will. And then we have the Rambam and many other authorities. But mind you, Rashi did not write a halachic work. Rashi wrote a commentary, not a work of ruling. So in terms of the codifiers and the ruling is that it's actually built by man. So we could leave it at that. There's many arguments in the Torah, many opinions, and a final ruling. The ruling is man. But we're going to reconcile the two views. V'yesh lomar, so the last two lines of the page. It's the smaller page, and with the last two lines of it. V'yesh lomar al yesod divrei chazal. We're going to answer and reconcile the two views. Based on the words of our sages, benoseh doma. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm reading. Okay, it's fine. Now turn to the big page. So far applies to both commentaries. The big page you want now. You were doing the small page, but I was reading. Yeah, all right. Sorry. V'yesh lomar, just to make sure that we are on the same page. Yeah, the two opinions. Yeah, Reish Samach. No. The top now of the top of the big page. Reish Samach. Yesh Lomar. So the Rebbe suggests, Shebepoel, in actual fact, itkaimu shtei deot. Both opinions will be fulfilled. How so? Namely, meaning what? Both. God and man. How will this work? And what's the source of this? Biyachas lebet HaMikdash HaShlishi, with respect to the third temple, Kotev Rambam, the Rambam writes, Binyan HaAsid Libanot, the future temple, Afal Pishu Katuv B'Yecheskel, even though the prophet Ezekiel describes it. Ezekiel was one of the prophets, and he describes the third and final temple. Eino mefurash u'mevu'ar, it's not clear and not explicit. We have a nice translation from Art Scroll. It's a book this thick, endeavoring to explain what the prophet is describing. They offer suggestions, but it's nothing hard and fast because it's vague in his description. Now, Ezekiel gave his prophecy, this is the interesting thing, after the destruction of the first temple. And he said, basically, you'll build a second one, but it's not going to be the final one, intimating there'll be a third temple. What happened was, V'anshe Beit Sheni, so when they built the second temple, Kishibanu b'mei Ezra, when they came back after the destruction of the first, at the hands of the Babylonians, they came back under the leadership of the great Ezra. They built the second temple as a hybrid, similar to the first, and whatever they could glean of the third vision, they incorporated. Whatever was clear, they incorporated that in the second temple as well. So the second temple was a bit like the first built by Solomon, and a bit like the vision of the third, the eternal one. The truth is, had they understood it, they would have built it completely that way, but they didn't, and the reason they didn't, because the time hadn't come for that temple. So Ezekiel didn't say, I have to back off, he didn't say that Mashiach is far off and there's going to be a third temple and not a second. But the fact that they couldn't follow his instructions was clear that they're really not yet building the ultimate temple. For those who appreciated that, you follow what I'm saying? But they did incorporate in the second whatever they were able to. So Banu Kibinyan Shlomo, they built it like Solomon's temple, Ume'en Dvarim, and similar to those things and Mufurashim, which were clear, B'Yecheskel in the vision of Ezekiel.
He never mentioned Ezekiel that it was a third.
He didn't say the number 3. He just the vision. the ultimate temple. The ultimate temple never to be destroyed. They hoped that this would be it. It may have morphed into that later, but the fact that they couldn't understand it was indicative that probably this probably would not be the eternal temple that he speaks of.
According to Nehemiah, when the old people, they remember the old one, they were crying. They say it's not like the original one.
Yeah.
It wasn't, the second one was not as nice as the original one.
But when the second one was refurbished by Hordus, in English, what's his name? Herod. That was even nicer than the first. Yeah. It went through many stages. It lasted 420 years. Okay. So Yesh Lamar. So the Rebbe suggested the following. Im Kain, if so, why wouldn't that apply as well now? It's not clear in Ezekiel. Im Kain shelo tiyeh efsharut libnot et kol Beit HaMikdash hashlishi b'yedei Adam, since you can't build the third one just based on the prophecy itself because it's not explicit. The description of the house described by Ezekiel is not explained explicitly. So what will we build? We'll build those parts like it did in the second temple. We'll build those parts. They built like this. Second time they built some like the first, and whatever they understood of the second. We will build whatever we can of the second, not employing the first at all, and the rest God will build. So there'll be a combination of both. So rak otam chalakim shel tzoratan bitan lilmod bebeit hamikdash hasheni. So we will build those things that are clear from the second temple, vilushar chelko habayit, but the rest of it, yushlim like the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, will be fulfilled by Hashem, v'yirdu min hashamayim, will descend from heaven. So he's reconciling the two views. That which we don't understand of it will be built by God. That which we do, based on what they understood of the second temple, we'll understand that as well, we will build. So both opinions are true. Let's continue. The Fiyas Berzeh will understand, therefore, another thing. The Rambam, he only brings which part of this equation? Man's building. The other sources are in the Zohar and the Midrash, more esoteric sources. Rashi in his commentary on the Talmud we looked at, that will describe the Beit HaMikdash descending from heaven. Why is it divided this way? That the Rambam describes man's role and the other sources God's role. In the text, the answer. The Fiyas Berzeh, Yuvan Yisod, they will understand the distinction between Divrei Midrashim v'Azor, the sources of the Medrash and the Zohar that describe it descending from heaven, which Rashi had quoted, the Divrei HaRambam to the words of the codifier, the Rambam. Because Sifcho Shel HaRambam Hu Sefer Lachot, the work of the Rambam is a work of law. He deals with what we need to do, man's obligations. He deals with the laws that man must observe. Therefore, which part of the equation does he mention? Us. Mashiach building it, man building it. He mentions only the part that man will build. And not the part that will descend from heaven. Because it's irrelevant to us. It's not part of the obligation that devolves on us because we can't. So he will build what he can build, is what he's saying. And what he can build, he doesn't talk about. The other sources complete that and say, will descend from heaven.
So just to clarify, there's no actual, other than Ezekiel, there is no other vision of this.
No.
There's nothing clear except what he wrote.
There's nothing about it at all, other than there will be one. But what it looks like, he describes.
Those details that Ezekiel, in other words, is not enough to build the temple.
No.
The third one.
No. That's the point. And that's why they didn't do it in the second temple. It just wasn't clear enough. So the second temple was built a bit like the first, and whatever they can get clear from Ezekiel's prophecy. We will, whatever we can get clear, we'll build. We'll share that in common with the second. And the rest, which we can figure out, they did like the first, but won't just do it, and it'll descend from heaven. So again, why is it coming from the Midrash and the Zohar, last paragraph before the 3 stars? Lumadzot, the Midrash and the Zohar, these are more esoteric, deeper levels of, if you like, of Torah. Rambam is, in this work, practical halacha. So practically speaking, what we have to do, he describes. The Midrash and the Zohar, on the other hand, oskim b'tiyo Beit HaMikdash hashlishi ugdolato. They are dealing about the spiritual dimension of the third temple, not the practicalities. That's not their mandate. Rambam is practical. Midrash and Zohar are more esoteric. Therefore, they underscore and bring to light at ma'alat hanifla shabo its virtuous component, which is ha'uvda, the fact shu yigalev yavo mishamayim. There'll be a dimension to it that will come from heaven. Shez b'schuta, and therefore yiskel ekin b'tzchi. That's why it will be eternal. Built by man exclusively, nothing's forever. But God partnering in an overt way in the third temple, that grants it its eternal value. V'lo yecharav l'olam, because God builds it, it will never be destroyed.
But did you say the second temple, part of it was God too?
No, it was all built by man based on that prophecy.
Okay.
The third temple, literally, it descends, will materialize out of heaven. The parts that we cannot do ourselves.
What happened to the opinion, or how does it fit into this, that if we're meritorious, it's going to come all from heaven?
All right, that's another answer. That's another answer. Another answer to this not contradiction, but these two positions. If we're meritorious, it comes from heaven, and if not, it's the natural process we build it. That's another answer. The Rambam, as a work of halacha, can't assume we're going to be meritorious, so he's got to assume that it's going to happen the lowest common denominator. He describes it, therefore, happening built by man. He doesn't mean to say that there is another possibility. There could be. But in halacha, we can always assume, you have to assume always the lowest level. That is another answer to this question. But this answer is, it's actually a fusion of both. Not two possibilities, but one. Now we're going to go a little bit deeper. Well, if God's building already, so build the whole thing. Why have, according to this answer, the combination of both man and God? It's the bottom of the page. What?
That was a follow-up question.
Yeah, go ahead. Yes.
So, in the context of, you have Mashiach here, and he understands all of Torah, and he's a leader, and he gathers everything.
Why would he not have that as a prophet?
How would he need the balance of the temple to come from Hashem? Wouldn't he know what the third temple should look, the final temple
as a prophecy? Like? Don't know. Good question. Don't know.
Can I add something small?
Think about it. Yes.
Shlomo Melech, the first one. Ezra and Nehemiah, they built the second one. Then all those, they said, when he rebuilt the temple, it was the nicest building the world ever saw.
Hudras.
Wasn't that all those?
Herod, yeah.
Wasn't that like the third temple already?
No, still didn't fulfill the prophecies of Yechezkel. Still not.
But they said it was the nicest.
Yeah, he made it bigger and stronger and beautiful, but it still wasn't the Ezekiel one. Perhaps in answer to your question, see, the description, as we just quoted from Rashi, is it will descend from heaven. So we cannot answer your question by saying, well, he'll be inspired by God then to know. When he's still doing it. There's actually an element of descending from heaven. The truth is, the next piece, I think, is going to answer your question. What's the next piece? Why not, if God is doing already part of it, so do the whole thing? Why does it have to be? Now, the answer we're giving here, that it's a combination of man and God. So this may answer your question as well. We can explain the reason, Beit HaMikdash, why will it be built this way? Chelko b'dei Adam, partially by man, v'chelko b'dei Shemayim, partially by heaven. And let's add Michael's question and say, well, why not? Why would God simply not inspire Mashiach as a prophet to understand Ezekiel's vision? It's really the same question, kind of the same question. So thank you for asking it, and let's see the answer. Amr Chazal, our sages say, and a very, very important and deep answer. And a very important message. Adam rotzeh bekav shelo. A person would rather one measure of his own mitisha kabim shel chevera than to be a recipient of 10 measures from his friend. Whatever it is, $1, I'd rather have $1 that I earned than $9 given to me as a gift. Now, short term probably would not opt for that. Short term would definitely up for the $9 from you than the $1 I earn, but not long term. Long term, a person has to feel a sense of accomplishment. You got to feel that you earned it.
Adam and Eve then.
Pardon?
So it's Adam and Eve. Adam never accomplished anything when he was in the Garden of Eden.
That's why he was banished from there in the end, because that's no way to live. No way to live, to be a constant recipient of benevolence. It's demoralizing, it destroys our humanity, because we need to feel achievement, accomplishment, and partners at least with God. So we enjoy much more the piece of bread that you earned and worked for and paid for than something that's handed to you. In fact, the Talmud in another place describes food that's given to you, but it's symbolic of that you don't work for at all, as bread of shame. So therefore, chaviv yoter al adam, it's more precious to a person. Last line of the page. Davar shenaseh al yado, something that he achieved. Gam imerko atzmi ein gadol, even though it's not that valuable, but he accomplishment, he achieved it. This is so important when it comes to in every area in life, starting with child rearing. As parents, we have the tendency, we love our children, we want to protect them, we want to provide for them. Certainly in their infancy, that's the way it must be. We are born entirely helpless. But then we need to cultivate and step back, and effective parenting is bringing up children that are independent and children can achieve on their own. And as you all know today, it's virtually a crisis. As kids are reaching this generation, I forgot the term that's used to describe it, you may know it, just escapes me. They're going out to the real world after going through school. And no, there's a word for this syndrome, where they get out to the real world. I mean, as you all know, what?
Helicopter parenting?
No, it's much broader than that. It's happening in schools. You can't give a kid a low grade. There's no winning in the sports field. Everybody's winning, everybody gets a prize, everybody gets... And they get out into the real world, and it doesn't work that way. They're in for deep disappointment and all kinds of neurosis that are just beginning, because this is a pretty new phenomenon, are setting in. These children are emotionally crippled. They're not capable of having relationships, keeping jobs, dealing with disappointment, a slew of problems.
From reality.
Yeah. Well-meaning parents, politically correctness, you can't criticize, you can't lose, everybody's a winner. Destructive. Right? So the point is, because it doesn't satisfy our deepest need, and that is to achieve and accomplish and take ownership with the inevitable ups and downs and losses and bruises that comes along with that. There's a great book written by Wendy Shalit called The Virtues of a Bruised Knee. Every parent should read it. It's a bestseller. Okay, so point being, right, that one appreciates one measure that one has earned, even that if that is less than the 9 you can get from your friend or your fellow. Top of the next page, even if what he's going to get is much more expensive. And therefore, applying that principle to us. So why not build it yourself, God? No. You got to participate with me. It's got to be your home. And that's what answer your question, why Mashiach will not get this prophecy of granted from heaven. He understands now the prophecy. That again will be God's doing, nothing's achieved. Here's the text, figure it out as well as you can, and build what you've understood. And the rest I'll do. Therefore in our case. It's not God's will. He doesn't want to give it completely from heaven as a free gift. There's a shame. There's an embarrassment. In the brackets, na'amad chisufa, bread of shame. It's from Aramaic. It's not Hebrew. It's from the Talmud. Therefore, kava Kadosh Baruch Hu, God established, shebnei Yisrael yishtatfu b'atzmam. We should participate ourselves. B'binyan Beit HaMikdash, in the building of the temple. V'kach yeh chaviv alehem. So it will be precious. B'chinat kav shelo. It will be our achievement. So that's what the Rambam is describing. Because the Rambam's role is to focus on what? Man's role. And the Zohar and the Midrash, the more esoteric dimensions of Torah, they complete the puzzle or the equation, and they describe what God does. And we quoted from Rashi. Mikdash adnei kolanu yadecha, the temple, O God, your hands have established. That's describing God's contribution, but in truth, it'll be both. Conclusion, Kachi bebeit HaMikdash hashlishi shtei ha'ma'alot, both things will be true. Hanitzchi, the eternal component, that'll be God's contribution. We are finite man. We can't build anything that lasts forever. So the eternal component, hanovat mikach shu'ibanu min hashamayim, that will become as a result that God will build it. V'achivavut, but the preciousness of it, that it's our home, that I built, that will be because we in fact will have built it. Hanavat mikach shegam bnei Yisrael yishtatzfu b'binyato, we will participate. In fact, the Rambam describes, in detail, and we'll do that people will participate in terms of donating materials, etc. Artisans will be involved to the degree that we can understand and decipher that prophecy, and the rest will come from heaven. So this is again a general message. It's a general message for life. The general message for life is, because the building of the temple is really, as we said yesterday, the prototype for the whole mission for which we are here since the dawn of creation. It's all evolving towards making the world the home for God. And the message here is, you've got to do your part, even not just at the end result, we're giving the final scenario, but along the way as well, the same partnership and exists. You got to do what you have to do. Don't expect it to be perfect. We're not. And Hashem will grant the divinity and the eternity and the perfection to what we do. In the words of the Pirkei Avot, it's not up to you to complete the job, but you're not exempt from participating in it. There's a great task to be done. You do what you have to do, imperfect as it is, but you give it your all. What's going to grant ultimately the success and the eternity, the nachas, whatever it is that you're achieving, your mitzvahs, that is God's component, and this perpetual partnership. And it's very edifying and encouraging to know that all we're asked to do is our best. And there are some things that are not in our control, and they're not meant to be. It's God's doing it, and sometimes you don't see His role, but eventually it will come. And eventually all that we do will be granted the eternal value and beauty by the Almighty Himself, if what we're doing is our best and right, and it's endeavoring to do what Hashem wants. It's a partnership. All right, friends? We're good? All right, so thank you all for coming. It's a wonderful morning. Let's have a nice picture. Not you. We'll get someone of the